"You are a dead end, Wanda." Audrey said it standing up, loud enough for the whole table to hear. By the time that sentence was over, 35 years of family history had a line drawn through my name. 11 relatives sat at that table. Not one of them looked at me. Every one of them looked at her. I set my phone down on top of the papers, screen up. "I've been recording you for 6 weeks, Audrey." Her face changed before I even hit play. The dinner had started 2 hours earlier, and I still hadn't touched my wine. It was the family's 35th anniversary. 35 years since the old man at the head of the table built the real estate empire that fed every person in that room. He hadn't said one word all night. He never did. Not until it mattered. I smoothed that napkin in my lap 3 times before anyone said a word out of place. Herbert, my husband, squeezed my hand once under the table and let go. He didn't look at me again for the rest of the night. 6 years married into this family, and I still checked the seating chart before I sat down. That should have told me something. Everyone kept saying how lucky I was. A house on the coast, a husband whose name opened doors. Nobody ever asked what I gave up walking through them. Audrey stood up first, glass raised, and everyone at that table assumed it was just another toast. 35 years, she said. A dynasty built on family, on loyalty, on knowing your place in it. Somebody's cousin actually clapped. Then she turned and looked straight at me. "You are a dead end, Wanda." She said the doctors had already told her. Said I was infertile. Said a dynasty doesn't carry dead weight for 6 years and call it patience. I hadn't told a single person in that family about any doctor. Not one. I had never even been to that doctor. "That's not true," I said. "And you know it isn't." "I know exactly what I know," Audrey said. She didn't raise her voice again. She didn't need to. The whole table had already gone quiet enough to hear a fork set down. She turned to the table like she was closing a business meeting, not ending a marriage. "The trust reverts to direct blood only. Effective tonight." Nobody at that table asked what direct blood only meant for the baby I hadn't told a single one of them about yet. Audrey smiled after she said it. A small, satisfied smile, like she'd been saving that line for months. "Sign it tonight," she said, "while everyone who matters is already in the room." She'd planned it that way. The anniversary, the toast, the audience. Even the seating chart put me directly across from her, where the whole table could watch my face. I'd married into a family that planned humiliation the way other people plan a wedding, down to the flowers. Herbert half stood. "Mom, that's not..." And then he just sat back down. That was the whole protest. 4 words and a chair creaking. His mother didn't even turn her head to look at him. 6 years of marriage, and I finally understood the order of things at that table. Audrey first, the dynasty second. Me somewhere after the good silverware. I kept waiting for him to reach for my hand again. He kept both of his flat on the table instead. I watched my husband's aunts look at me the way you look at a stain on someone else's carpet. Pity, then disgust, then back to their plates. One of them murmured, "Finally," to the woman beside her. Not even quietly. A cousin refilled his wine like nothing had happened at all. Like watching a woman get erased from a family was just something you did between courses. Nobody at that table asked Audrey a single question. 11 people, and not one of them wanted to know if it was true. Audrey slid the amendment across the table herself. One signature line at the bottom. My name already typed above it. That page was the first real proof I had. Proof this hadn't started tonight. Proof it had been drafted, printed, and sitting in a drawer for weeks, waiting for an audience. "Pick up the pen, Wanda," Audrey said. "You knew this was coming." I didn't move. She reached across the table herself and pushed a fountain pen against my folded hands. "Sign it," she said, "or I start reading that fertility report out loud, page by page, right now. Your choice." I looked at Herbert. I wanted one word out of him. One. He looked at his plate instead. I hated that it had come to this. Recording my own family in my own home for 6 weeks straight. But I hadn't started this fight, and I wasn't going to lose it by playing fair. It started with one voicemail Audrey forgot she'd left on the house line. After that, I stopped trusting a single closed door in that mansion. 11 recordings. Kitchen conversations, car rides, one from the study, through a door she thought was thick enough. My hand found the phone in my bag before I'd even decided to move it. I didn't pick up the pen. I set it on top of the amendment, screen up, the way you'd set down a winning hand. "I've been recording you for 6 weeks, Audrey." My voice didn't shake. Hers would, soon enough. 11 recordings. I hadn't played a single one yet. Audrey's smile was already gone. Her eyes dropped to the screen, like it might bite her. Down at the head of the table, the old man finally put down his fork. Nobody had asked me to sit down. Nobody had told me to stop either, so I reached for the first recording. I hit play. Audrey's own voice came out of that speaker, tinny and unmistakable, and the whole table went as still as the wine in the glasses. "Pay him whatever he wants," her recorded voice said. "I don't care what the actual results say. I need those results to say infertile." A second voice answered her, calm, professional, like they'd done this kind of business before. "Consider it done, Mrs. Whitmore. It'll cost you, though." "Everything costs me," Audrey's recorded voice said. "That's what money is for." "That's Hugh Sawyer," I said out loud, to the table, to all of them. "Your doctor, the one who runs the fertility clinic you personally sent me to." I let that sit for a second before I said the rest of it. "The one whose results you've been reading out loud to this family for 3 years, like they were scripture." For 3 full seconds, Audrey didn't say anything at all. 3 seconds, after 35 years of never once being caught. Somebody's fork hit a plate, and it sounded like a gunshot in that silence. Then she reached across the table for the phone, fast, her chair scraping back against the floor. Her sleeve caught the wine carafe on the way. It went over sideways and split open across the white tablecloth like something had actually been wounded. Red wine ran straight toward the amendment with my name typed on it. Nobody moved to stop it. Nobody moved to help her either. I pulled the phone back before her fingers closed around it. "There's 10 more where that came from." "Turn it off," Audrey said. Her voice had a shake in it now that hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier. "I don't think I will," I said, and I set the phone back down where everyone could see it. "You didn't ask me to turn it off when you were reading me the results yourself," I said, "at this same table, 6 months ago." Audrey looked around the table, at 11 faces that had spent 6 years agreeing with everything she said. Not one of them was agreeing with her now. "This is a family matter," she tried. "This does not need an audience." "You made it an audience," I said. "You picked tonight. You picked this table. I just picked the order." The wine reached the amendment before anyone thought to move it. My name, the one she'd typed above the signature line, went soft and unreadable under the stain. Nobody in that family had touched a pen for 6 years to fix a single thing that was actually broken. It took spilled wine to finally erase something. I almost laughed. 6 years of paperwork designed to erase me, and the only page that actually got erased that night did it by accident. I looked at Herbert. "One more," I said. "This one's yours." He didn't say don't. He just stared at the phone like it was already too late to ask. I played the second recording. Herbert's own voice this time. Low, talking fast, the way people talk when they think no one else can hear. "If the doctor's numbers say her, not me, none of this ever traces back to me. She never has to know I can't." Audrey's recorded voice again, right behind his. "She won't. Not if you sign off on the amendment tonight." The real Herbert, sitting 3 feet from me, made a sound I'd never heard him make before. Something between a cough and a word he didn't finish. "Herbert." I said his name once, flat, and waited. "It's not..." He stopped. Started again. "It's more complicated than that." "Is it?" I said, because from where I'm sitting, it sounds exactly as complicated as it is. He looked at his mother instead of me. She didn't look back. Audrey's hands found the edge of the table and held on, like the floor had tilted. She didn't defend him. She didn't defend herself either. Audrey Whitmore simply had nothing left to say. 35 years of being the one person in that house who always had the last word, and it took one recording to take it away from her. "You knew," I said to her, not a question. "You knew, and you still stood up in front of everyone and called me the dead end." She still didn't answer. Her silence was its own kind of confession, and everyone at that table heard it exactly that way. Somewhere down the table, a cousin quietly set his phone in his lap, screen tilted up, recording something of his own now. 6 years of doctors and calendars and a nursery I was told to be patient about. 6 years of being called the reason. It was never me. It was him. And his own mother had helped him bury it. I thought about every appointment I'd sat through alone while Herbert claimed he was in meetings. Every time his mother had looked at my stomach like it owed her something. None of it had ever been mine to fix. It had never even been my failure to begin with. Nobody at that table said a word. Not one person reached for a napkin, and the wine kept spreading toward the edge of the cloth. I looked down the table at the one man who hadn't said a single word since the toast. He'd built this family's fortune from nothing, and he'd sat through every second of it in total silence. Then, from the head of the table, a chair scraped back. Slow, deliberate. The old man was standing up. Whatever came out of his mouth next, I already knew it was going to change everything I thought I understood about that dinner. The old man was Ernest, 92 years old, and he hadn't raised his voice at that table in longer than I'd been alive. He didn't raise it now, either. He just raised one hand, and the whole room went quiet. "Enough," he said. One word. Nobody at that table had ever needed more than one word from him. Ernest looked at Audrey first. "You bribed a doctor to lie about my grandson's wife. You are done running this family's affairs. Effective tonight." "Ernest, I was protecting this family," Audrey said. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "You were protecting yourself," he said. "Don't confuse the two in front of me again." Audrey opened her mouth a second time. Nothing came out. For the second time that night, she had nothing. 35 years of running that household like her own private company, and it took her son's own recorded voice to finally get her fired from it. Then he looked at Herbert. "And you lied to your own wife for 6 years about why there was no child. You're done too." "Grandfather, please," Herbert started. "Please what?" Ernest said. "Please keep the title. Please keep pretending. I watched you sit at this table for 6 years and let your own mother call this woman broken. You're done too." Herbert didn't argue after that. He just stared at his own hands, like they belonged to somebody else. "Effective tonight," Ernest said again. And this time, nobody at that table doubted he meant it. Then Ernest turned to me, and his voice changed. Softer, businesslike. The voice of a man closing a deal, not ending one. $13.5 million, he said. "A settlement. You sign a non-disclosure agreement tonight, and you walk out of this house with more money than most people see in a lifetime. All you have to do is agree to never speak of any of this again," he added. I looked at that number for exactly 1 second. Then I looked back at him. "No," I said. The whole table made a sound at once, somewhere between a gasp and a laugh, like they'd never once heard anyone turn Ernest down. "Take a moment," Ernest said. "That is more money than most people see in a lifetime, and I am only offering it once." "I heard you the first time," I said. "The answer is still no." Everyone at that table had spent 6 years telling me exactly what I was worth to this family. None of them had ever bothered asking me what I actually wanted. I thought about the nursery Audrey had already picked colors for, back when she still believed the failure was mine. I thought about every appointment I'd sat through alone, being told to be patient about a man's own secret. None of that came with a price tag Ernest could slide across a table and expect me to sign for. $13.5 million, offered like it was supposed to end the conversation. It wasn't even close to the real number on the table, and I hadn't even shown them the real number yet. I reached into my bag one more time. Not for the phone this time. I pulled out a folded piece of paper I'd been carrying for 4 days, waiting for the right table to put it on. 4 days of carrying it through this house, folded small enough to fit inside a makeup bag, past a mother-in-law who searched my things when she thought I didn't notice. 4 days of sitting across from Herbert at breakfast, watching him complain about his mother's schedule, and saying absolutely nothing about what I already knew. "I'm 6 weeks pregnant," I said. "This is from a clinic 3 states away. Nobody in this family sent me there. I found it myself, and I paid for it myself." I set it down flat in front of Ernest, the way Audrey had set the amendment in front of me 2 hours earlier. Same table, same chandelier, a very different kind of paper. And Herbert isn't the father. 11 relatives, and every single one of them leaned toward that piece of paper at the exact same time. Somebody's water glass tipped, and nobody reached for it. Nobody cared about the tablecloth anymore. Herbert's head finally came up off his hands, the first movement out of him since Ernest had stripped him of everything. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me, like he'd never actually seen me before that moment. Ernest picked up the paper himself, read it once, then read it again, slower. Something moved behind his eyes that I hadn't seen from him all night. Not shock, recognition. The look of a man watching his own plan land exactly where he'd aimed it, just years ahead of schedule. "Do you know who the father is?" he asked. Quiet now, different than a minute ago. "No," I said. "But you clearly do." Ernest didn't answer that directly. He just kept staring at the page, like a man checking his own math one more time before he said it out loud. "Whatever you already know," I said, "you might as well say it. I've had enough of this family's secrets for one night." Audrey's head came up sharply at that. Whatever Ernest knew, she clearly didn't. That much was written all over her face. Ernest set the paper down slowly, lining it up with the edge of the table. "There's something you should know," he said, "about that clinic, and about why I already know exactly what's on that page. The donor," Ernest said, "isn't a stranger you'd find in a file. He's my grandson." The table went quiet in a different way than before. Not shocked, exactly. Confused, like the math hadn't caught up yet. "I've had a grandson for 6 years that this family doesn't know about," Ernest said. "I built a life for him, off the books, away from all of this." "That's not possible," Audrey said. "Herbert is your only grandson. I would know." "You'd know what I let you know," Ernest said, without even turning to look at her. "That has always been the arrangement in this family, whether you noticed it or not." I sat there, holding a piece of paper that had just turned out to belong to a much bigger story than the one I thought I was telling. "I run that clinic," he said, quietly, "through 3 shell companies your husband's mother never bothered to trace." "Why?" I said. It came out flatter than I meant it to. "Because a dynasty this size needs blood that isn't rotten," Ernest said. "I've been looking for the right woman to carry it forward for 6 years. I didn't expect to find her married to my own grandson." "You didn't find me," I said. "You put me at this table. You put me in that clinic system without ever once saying my name to my face." Ernest didn't argue with that. He just folded his hands and let the accusation stand, which was somehow worse than watching him deny it. "I make careful decisions," he said. "I don't make cruel ones for the sake of it. There's a difference, whether or not you believe me tonight." "Tell that to the woman you just watched get called a dead end," I said, "in front of 11 people, at your table." "So here is the real offer," Ernest said. "Not $13.5 million. The head of this trust. Every property, every account, run through you and that child, starting tonight." The whole table turned toward me at once, like the seating chart itself had just been rewritten in front of them. I sat there with 2 offers on the table and didn't reach for either one of them. "You didn't ask me once," I said, "whether I wanted any part of this family's money at all. Nobody offers $13.5 million and then the whole trust in the same conversation, unless they're worried about losing something bigger," I said. "What are you actually afraid I'll do, Ernest?" He looked at me for a long moment before he answered. "Tell the truth. Publicly. Before I've had time to control how it lands." At least that part was honest. The doors at the end of the room slammed open before Ernest could say another word. A woman stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, mascara running, breathing like she'd run the whole driveway. "Don't sign anything he's offering you," she said. "He orchestrated all of it, every single piece of it." Herbert's face went white. "Marion, what are you doing here?" Nobody at that table needed him to explain how he knew her name. Audrey's head snapped toward her son so fast her chair scraped the floor a second time. "You brought her into this house?" Audrey said, and for once, her voice wasn't aimed at me at all. "I didn't bring her anywhere," Herbert said. "I don't even know how she found the address." "I've known this address for 2 years," Marion said. "I just never had a reason good enough to walk through the front door. Until tonight." "Herbert's mistress," I said out loud, mostly for the rest of the table's benefit. "Wonderful. Add it to the list." Marion didn't flinch at that. She kept walking toward the head of the table, straight at Ernest, her heels leaving wet prints across the floor. "He's been paying me for 2 years," she said, "to keep his grandson's real identity out of every record his lawyers could reach. I have the wire transfers, I have the messages, I have all of it." "Marion," Ernest said, "you were paid to keep a private family matter private, nothing more." "I was paid to lie for you," she said. "There's a difference, and you know it, because you're the one who taught me the difference." Herbert put his head in his hands. Whatever this was between the two of them, it clearly wasn't news to him, and that was somehow its own quiet confession. Ernest didn't deny it. He just watched her cross the room, the way you watch weather you can't stop. "You built this whole night," Marion said. "The dinner, the amendment, even the timing of that clinic report. You wanted her to find out exactly this way, in front of exactly this table." "That's not true," Ernest said, his voice rising, sharper than it had been all evening. "Then tell them who scheduled the clinic's results to arrive this exact week," Marion said. "Tell them who told Audrey which night to make her move." He didn't answer that one either. I honestly wasn't sure anymore whose side of that table I was sitting on. Every person in that room had been lying to somebody, and I was starting to wonder how many of those lies had been pointed at me on purpose. I hadn't even noticed him standing there. Security, I'd assumed, the whole night. Furniture that happened to be shaped like a man. He stepped into the light and pulled the earpiece out of his ear like it was the last thing he'd ever need it for. "I'm the donor," he said. "And I'm not a stranger to this family either." The whole table turned to look at him like he'd appeared out of nowhere, even though he'd been standing against that wall since before the first course. I'd walked past him twice on my way to the powder room and never once looked at his face. I was starting to understand that had probably been the point. Ernest's face did something I hadn't seen it do all night. It actually moved. "Harvey," he said. Just the name, like it cost him something to say it out loud in front of everyone. "You hired me to guard this house 4 years ago," Harvey said. "You never once mentioned I was already blood. I had to find that out from your own paperwork." "It was safer for you not to know," Ernest said. "Safer for everyone." "Safer for you," Harvey said. "You wanted a spare heir close enough to watch and far enough away that nobody would ask questions. I was never safe. I was convenient." Audrey stared between the two of them like she was watching a second family tree grow roots through the floor of her own dining room. "How many more of you are there?" she said, quietly, to no one in particular. He unclipped the radio from his belt and dropped it into the wine pooled on the table. Deliberate. Both hands free. "I'm done working security for a man who used my own body to build his backup plan," Harvey said. And I'm done pretending I didn't know exactly what that clinic form was for. You knew, I said. It wasn't really a question. I knew what I was signing, he said. I didn't know your name until Ernest said it at this table tonight. I want that on the record, since apparently everything else here gets recorded eventually. It was the first thing anyone had said to me all night that actually sounded like an apology. How much did he pay you, I asked, to spend 4 years standing in corners of this house, pretending you didn't already belong in it? Harvey didn't answer that one right away. Enough that I stopped asking myself that question a long time ago, he finally said. Tonight's the first time I've thought about it since. Marion hadn't said another word since Harvey started talking. She didn't need to. She just stood by that door, arms crossed, watching 6 years of this family's secrets fall apart in real time. You could have told me all of this the polite way, I said to her, before I found out about your husband's mother's doctor from a recording. Polite doesn't get anyone's attention in this family, Marion said. You should know that better than anyone by now. That was when the first siren reached the house. Faint, then closer. Red and blue light started sweeping across the tall windows behind Ernest's chair, painting the whole wine-stained table in moving color. Somebody had called the police. I hadn't. I still don't know which one of them did. Ernest's eyes went straight to Marion. She just shook her head, calm, like she'd been waiting all night to watch him wonder. Whoever made that call, they'd picked the exact right moment. Every piece of proof anyone would ever need was already sitting on that table, wine-stained and impossible to take back. 2 more guards appeared in the doorway, hands halfway to their radios, waiting for an order nobody was in any condition to give. Ernest didn't give one. Audrey didn't either. Nobody at that table was running anything anymore. 6 years I'd watched this family hand out orders like it was the only language they spoke. Sirens outside a window turned out to be the one thing none of them had a script for. Harvey looked at me, not at Ernest. Sirens mean 10 minutes, maybe less, he said. You should decide what you're doing with them before they walk through that door. He stepped sideways, away from the doorway he'd been guarding all night, and didn't step back. Harvey, Ernest said. A warning, or maybe the last order he had left in him. Harvey didn't answer him. He just kept his eyes on the open path to the hallway and left it open. Nobody stopped me when I stood up from that table. Not Audrey, not Herbert, not even Ernest. I picked my phone back up off the wine-stained amendment. I wasn't thinking about a settlement anymore. 11 recordings, 1 clinic record with my name and Herbert's on it, a mistress dripping rainwater onto imported hardwood, and a guard who just quit in front of his own boss. I had more proof sitting on that table than any lawyer in this city could argue away in a closed room. I was thinking about how many people, right now, deserved to hear all of this at exactly the same time. I turned the camera around, not to record this time, to broadcast it. Turn that off, Ernest said. His voice had lost the calm from 10 minutes earlier. No, I said. I think everyone should see exactly what a $13.5 million apology looks like. The viewer count climbed past 200 before I'd even said his name. I said it anyway. Full name, company name. The name of the clinic, spelled out slow enough for anyone taking notes. Comments started scrolling up the side of the screen almost immediately. Someone had already recognized the dining room from a magazine spread 2 years earlier. "You will regret this," Ernest said. Quiet, controlled. The same voice he'd used to strip Audrey and Herbert of everything 20 minutes earlier. "I already regret marrying into this family," I said. "This is just the part where I stop pretending I don't." "I can make sure you never see a dollar of that trust," he said. "Live stream or not." "I don't want your trust," I said. "I want the 800 people watching right now to know exactly who you are." "You have no idea what you're doing to this family's name," he said. "I have a very good idea," I said. "I've been sitting inside it for 6 years, being told exactly what it was worth. Now I get to tell people what it actually cost." He took one step toward me, and Harvey moved before I even flinched, closing the gap between us like he'd been waiting all night for exactly that reason. "Sit down, Ernest," Harvey said. Calm. Final. Not a request. "Here's your third option, since you only offered me 2, I said, loud enough for the phone's microphone to catch every word. "I'm not signing your amendment. I'm not taking your settlement. And I am not walking out of this house quietly." "You're going to regret the exposure more than I will," Ernest said. "You bribed a doctor," I said. "You ran a fertility clinic to build yourself a spare heir. You watched your daughter-in-law get called a dead end at your own anniversary dinner and said nothing until it benefited you. Explain to me which part of that you think 800 strangers are going to side with you on." He didn't answer. His mouth opened, and nothing came out at all. "Say something," I said. "You've had an answer for everything else tonight." The silence lasted long enough that the viewer count did the talking for him. 600. Then closer to 1,000. 92 years of building something, and he'd spent the last 20 minutes watching it get undone at his own table by the one person he'd never bothered to plan around. Marion stepped further into frame, deliberately, still dripping onto the floor. "Ask him about the 2 years of transfers," she said, loud enough for the stream. "I have copies. I'll post every one of them tonight." Herbert put his head down on the table completely. Audrey didn't move at all, like stillness might make the camera forget she was in the room. Ernest looked at the phone, then at Marion, then at the doorway, calculating an exit that didn't exist anymore. "Audrey," I said, and turned the phone toward her before she could decide whether to answer. "Anything you'd like to add? You had plenty to say 2 hours ago." She lifted her chin, one last time. The same posture she'd used to call me a dead end in front of 11 relatives. "I raised this family," she said. "Every single one of you owes something to a decision I made." "We owe you a lawsuit," Marion said. "Possibly several." For once, Audrey didn't have a comeback ready. She just looked down at the wine stains spreading toward her own side of the table now, like it had finally found its way to her. The sirens weren't faint anymore. They were right outside. Through the window behind Ernest, I watched the first set of headlights swing up the driveway, red and blue light washing across his face like a verdict arriving early. 10 minutes, Harvey had said. It had taken 8. I kept the phone up, kept the camera steady, kept every word of it live for whoever was still watching. Ernest sat back down in his chair, slowly, like his legs had finally run out of the same authority his voice had run out of 2 minutes earlier. Nobody at that table told him to sit. Nobody had to. The lights coming through the window had already done the talking. Car doors slammed outside, one after another. Footsteps on gravel, fast, More than one set. Whatever came through that door next, it was going to happen in front of a phone with over 1,000 strangers watching. And there was no version of tonight where Ernest got to control how any of it looked anymore. They didn't knock. 6 officers came through those double doors like they already knew exactly which 2 men they were there for. Ernest didn't fight it. He just held his wrists out, the same steady hands that had pushed $13.5 million across that table 20 minutes earlier. Fraud, one officer said, reading off a card. Bribery of a medical professional. We'll have more once we've been through what's on that table. Herbert cried. Actual tears. The first honest thing I'd seen out of him all night, and it was 20 years too late to matter to me. Wanda, I never wanted any of this, he said, as they walked him past my chair. I know, I said. That was always the problem with you. You never wanted anything enough to actually do something about it. Harvey stood by the doorway the whole time, arms crossed, watching the 2 men who'd raised him and used him get walked out of a house he'd guarded for 4 years without ever really belonging to it. Audrey didn't get handcuffed. Not that night, but she screamed anyway. One long, raw sound. Watching a career of quiet control get led out of her own dining room, in front of a phone, still broadcasting to over 1,000 strangers. This is not how this family ends, she said. Nobody in that room bothered to answer her. The trust had already ended it for her. An officer stayed behind to take her statement. I heard her start it 3 different times, 3 different versions of the same night, before she finally just stopped talking altogether. 35 years of being the one person at that table who always had the last word, and by the end of it, she didn't have a single sentence left that anyone believed. Nobody stopped me at the door this time either. I walked out into the rain with one hand over my stomach and didn't look back at that house once. Not even when Marion called my name from the porch, offering me a ride I didn't need. Harvey caught up with me halfway across the driveway. You should have someone drive you, he said. You're shaking. I've been shaking since the toast, I said. I'm used to it by now. He didn't argue. He just walked me to my car in the rain and stood there until I pulled out of the gate, the last honest person left standing in that whole family. The wine on that tablecloth would still be there in the morning. I wouldn't be. I drove until the mansion's gate lights disappeared out of my mirror. And then I kept driving another 40 minutes past that, until the roads got smaller and the signs started naming towns I'd never heard of. I stopped at a diner 2 states over from the only home I'd known for 6 years and ordered herbal tea because coffee felt like something that belonged to a person I wasn't anymore. The waitress asked if I was all right. I said I would be, and I actually believed it this time. My phone kept lighting up in my bag. The stream was still climbing, long after I'd stopped holding the camera. I didn't check the number. It didn't matter anymore who was watching. I sat in that booth in a soaked emerald dress, mascara wherever mascara ends up after a night like that, and nobody in the room was telling me where to sit. My phone buzzed once, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Both men in custody. Documents recovered. The trust is frozen, pending investigation. I read it twice, then deleted it. Whatever came next, I didn't need to keep proof of it in my pocket. I'd already lived through the only part that mattered. A second text came in a minute later, from Harvey this time. Just 3 words. You did good. I didn't delete that one. The sun came up over the parking lot while I sat there, and for the first time in 6 years, Nobody at any table was deciding anything about my life without asking me first. I put a hand on my stomach and thought about the one relative in that whole family who'd never once called me a dead end and hadn't even been born yet. I lost a husband that night. I lost a house, a name, a seat at a table that never wanted me there in the first place. 6 years I'd spent trying to earn a place in that family. It took one dinner to understand there had never been a place worth earning. I got the truth instead, and a child who was going to grow up knowing exactly who fought for both of them. Turns out, a dead end was never the end of anything. It was just the first place I finally stopped and turned around.